Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving straight into a massive, frankly mind-bending paradox about the explosive growth of artificial intelligence and the physical world it relies on. The source material we're looking at tackles a really specific, tough dilemma. If AI is potentially terrifying and destructive, why on earth would anyone actually advocate for building the colossal data centers required to run it? It sounds completely backward, right? Well, let's unpack exactly how the source untangles this whole complex issue.
We're going to start with a direct challenge. The speaker in our source material actually shares a pretty hostile message they received from a subscriber. And honestly, this quote hits the nail on the head. It perfectly frames the core contradiction. The subscriber is basically asking, how can you constantly warn us about the dangers of these big AI companies on the one hand, but then turn around and demand we build the very infrastructure they need to survive on the other? It is a fantastic question. And to really get the answer being provided here, we first have to look at how the source defines the technological reality we're currently living in.
So, Section 1, the AI black hole. Our current moment in time is absolutely critical. The speaker asserts, and they're echoing major tech figures like Sam Altman here, that we have already crossed the AI singularity. And the source uses this brilliant, super vivid metaphor. Think of it like a spaceship getting way too close to a black hole. Once you hit that singularity, that point of no return, you are caught in the gravitational pull. You literally cannot reverse the engines. Basically, the die is cast and we are being pulled into the black hole of this technology, whether we like it or not.
Now, because we can't just stop the sheer momentum of AI development, the source argues that our whole strategy has to shift. It's no longer about avoiding AI, it's entirely about who is ultimately going to control it. The speaker notes that, yeah, you might eventually have to pull a ripcord and just completely opt out of the system if things go truly south, but, and this is a big but, that time is not right now. Right now, the focus absolutely has to be on the geopolitical reality of who dominates this unavoidable future.
Which brings us right into Section 2. The race against China.
The source frames this geopolitical threat as a strict, binary battle for global technological dominance. Their absolute primary justification for building local American data centers is the looming threat of a Chinese monopoly over AI. They argue that a Chinese AI system is, by its very nature, designed from the ground up as a state surveillance tool. So the warning here is that relying on foreign infrastructure would basically result in absolute global surveillance and control.
And this builds into a very specific economic threat. The explainer outlines a distinct market capture strategy. Look, AI costs hundreds of billions of dollars to develop, right? It's astronomically expensive. But the tactic the source expects China to use is simply giving their advanced AI systems away for free. And why would they do that? To completely collapse American competitors who obviously can't compete with free, thereby forcing the whole world to build upon a Chinese technological spine.
So the absolutely crucial point here is the lock-in effect. The source compares this to something we all know, smartphone brand loyalty. If you build your whole digital life inside the Apple ecosystem, you know it's incredibly difficult to just switch over to a Galaxy later, and vice versa. It's the same principle but on a massive scale. If the global tech infrastructure gets built on a free, foreign AI system first, you cannot easily switch later. That permanent lock-in is exactly what this aggressive push for local data centers is trying to prevent.
Moving on to Section 3, negotiating with data centers.
Okay, so if American data centers are the necessary countermeasure to this massive global threat, how should we actually handle them when tech companies want to build them in our own backyards? The source provides a really specific, highly aggressive playbook for local towns. This is not about just rolling over and letting tech giants do whatever they want. It's about leveraging the town's position. The source suggests demanding zero property tax for residents, forcing the tech companies to subsidize the town's electricity, enforcing incredibly strict protections for local water supplies, and demanding total transparency through open community discussions and town votes.
The big takeaway here, local citizens actually have leverage. The source urges communities to negotiate like madmen, explicitly suggesting that you ask for the sun and the stars so you can at least walk away with the moon. Communities must extract massive local benefits and protections in exchange for hosting the heavy infrastructure that the country supposedly needs to stay competitive.
All right, Section 4, the Eisenhower parallel.
To contextualize this really intense balance of building dangerous technology while remaining deeply skeptical of it, the source draws a major historical parallel to President Dwight D. Eisenhower. Think back to the Cold War for a second. Nuclear missiles were viewed as a highly dangerous, terrifying reality, but they were also seen as an absolute necessity to prevent foreign domination. So, just as Eisenhower warned us about the military-industrial complex while fully acknowledging the need for nuclear deterrence, the source argues we have to build AI data centers while maintaining extreme, constant vigilance against the tech companies and the government that controls them. Looking at the bigger picture really puts this perspective into focus. The speaker notes they've actually been studying and warning about this stuff since the 1990s. Now in the present day, the singularity has been reached. But interestingly, the source suggests we actually have a bit of a grace period ahead of us. Maybe 5, 25, or even 100 years, where AI will genuinely be incredibly helpful to humanity. But make no mistake, eventually that period will end, and ultimate control of the technology will be fully consolidated.
And that brings us to the core tension of this entire argument, the trust deficit. Because despite advocating for all this physical infrastructure, the speaker frankly admits they do not actually trust any of the major entities poised to control it. They don't trust China, they don't trust the US government, and they certainly don't trust the tech companies, pointing out that some tech leaders act like godless men who are quite literally trying to build a god. For the speaker, it is a true choose-your-poison scenario.
Finally, Section 5, the individual defense.
So let's recap. If the technology is inevitable, and the institutions building it are completely untrustworthy, what is the source's ultimate solution for you, the viewer? Well, the final defense presented is entirely spiritual and individualistic. The source contrasts the looming threat of the collective, meaning being absorbed into massive AI systems or one-world ideologies, against the sanctity of the individual. The argument is that reliance on God-given rights and spiritual vigilance is literally the only true way to weather the coming technological storm.
The source uses this vivid, classic biblical metaphor to really emphasize the challenge ahead. Threading a camel through the eye of a needle is, well, impossible without extraordinary focus and guidance. The speaker warns that navigating this incoming era without losing your moral compass and individual identity is going to get increasingly difficult for society as a whole.
Because of this, the source's call to action is deeply, deeply personal. They're urging their audience to immediately stop self-defeating behaviors and the lies we all tell ourselves. The speaker firmly believes that the coming societal strife shouldn't be a reason to just give up in despair, but rather it's an opportunity to forge a much stronger personal character. Being pushed up against the wall, they argue, is exactly what forces you to figure out what truly matters and what is actually worth standing up for. As we wrap up this explainer, we want to leave you with this really profound dilemma to chew on. We are entering an era of inevitable technological giants. If the source is correct, we have to build these massive data centers to protect ourselves on a global scale, all while simultaneously aggressively guarding our local communities and our own individual identities from the very technology we are building. It is a crazy high-stakes balancing act. So how do we ensure the survival of the nation without sacrificing the sanctity of the individual? It's a question we are all going to have to answer as these data centers begin appearing in our own backyards. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep asking the big questions.